Okay, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to open up the Electronic City Council workshop for Tuesday, March 2nd. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I do not see Councilmember Nyhagen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I called her today.
Okay.
She's not feeling well.
Okay. Councilmember Bobbitt, would you be willing to lead us into our meeting with a few words?
Sure. Let's bow our heads, please. Our kind Father in heaven, tonight, Lord, we just simply ask for your presence as we go about our workshop tonight. We ask that you will bless this time. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now call to order the workshop. Will the clerk please take roll call
Yes,
and
ma'am.
verify a quorum? Sorry.
Councilmember Bobbitt,
Present?
Councilmember Cleveland,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Present.
Councilmember Selby,
Present.
Councilmember Sherman,
Present.
Councilmember Trope,
Present.
and Councilmember Nyhagen has requested to be excused this evening. We also have Mayor Hernandez, Finance Director Brian Carlton, City Attorney Ree Colwell, Police Chief Troy Tamaris, HR Manager Sean Doring, myself, and from JUB, we have Alex Fazzari and Spencer Montgomery. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. And Mr. Rizzatello will be joining us later. He is in another meeting at the moment. You do have a quorum. We're good to go.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have several workshop items tonight. No action is going to be taken, just as a reminder. So first we have up the Deccio Road Safety Issues Memo. Spencer Montgomery and Daryl Moore of JUB Engineers will be presenting.
Well, hello, my name is Spencer Montgomery. Daryl couldn't make it tonight. He and I have discussed the issues here, and he helped prepare the memo that you have received in advance. Mike had asked that I just briefly review the memo in 5 to 10 minutes and allow for some questions from council. So I'm going to share my screen. When I do that, I'm going to lose your pictures, so I don't know if I'll necessarily see your hands as I maximize my screen to it's telling me that the host is disabled participant screen sharing.
I'm giving you that right now.
Okay, great.
And Spencer, if somebody has any questions, I'll interrupt you and let you know.
That's just perfect.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you should be good to go now. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Each of these works a little bit different, we have learned, so we'll get through it. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet, no.
Oh, let me try again here.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So we sent the memo, and tonight I think it's an issue that's familiar to all of you. Last fall, we're going to discuss parking issues and options on Deccio Road, and So just a little bit of background to refresh for you. Originally, and I've got a graphic that will show some of this after this page. Originally, Deccio Road was a dead-end road with access to the north at C Street. When Whitman Drive was constructed in the mid-2000s, Deccio Road was extended to the south. At the southern end, as it approaches Whitman Drive, it narrows from 36 feet to 28 feet. And parking has been allowed on both sides of the street. I don't know the long-term history of safety issues and any accidents and things like that, but some complaints started arising last fall from the neighborhood about how it felt unsafe from a parking standpoint if cars were parked on both sides of the street. So that issue is to your Utilities and Transportation Advisory Committee or Commission, and they made a recommendation in November to restrict some of the parking at the southern end of Deccio Road. And when that was done, then some of the other neighbors complained that there wasn't enough parking. So council had asked for it to be looked at a little bit closer, which is what we have done here. So the existing conditions, I already mentioned that it narrows from 36 feet up in this area down to 26 feet in the middle, or at the southern end. In the middle, it's about 28 feet wide in between these areas here. So the colors that you see here at the end is a restriction of parking existing because of height distance at the corners. The blue would be restricted because of driveways so that people can access driveways to the residences there. And then there's a fire hydrant right in this area here. So where there is not color, there you can park there. So you can fit about 2 here on each side of the street, 2 more here, 1 up here, and 2 more up here. It can accommodate approximately 9 vehicles in that area. My understanding is that the city doesn't have any traffic counts there, but based upon the number of homes in that area on that street, the average daily traffic would be in the range of 250 to 300 vehicles. So these are some pictures taken from Google Street View. You can see this is the same picture, just zoomed in. So if somebody's trying to get through here, you can't fit 2 cars in between safely. My understanding from some of the comments is that they have moved the bus stop from this area because it was challenging for the bus to get through if cars were parked on both sides. And so they had moved the bus stop down onto Whitman Street, which is a collector road. Wanted to take just a couple of minutes to review what your street standards are. So it calls for 2 10-foot travel lanes, one in each direction with 8 feet for parking on each side of the road. Where roads are narrower than that, it allows parking on one side where there's 28 feet or more, and parking on both sides where there's 34 feet or more. We researched some other jurisdictions, Walla Walla, Kennewick, and Richland, as well as this. This stands for the American Association of State Transportation and Highway Officials. They have some national guidelines in there, and all of these are very similar. There are some things identified in this AASHTO document that say, if circumstances are, extremely restrictive, that you can have some narrower lanes on local streets. Probably would not necessarily be the best thing on streets where traffic is moving a little faster. If you're going a little slower, you can fit through a narrower place more comfortably. So these come out of your standard plans that are provided to developers and used when new streets are built. And I just want to point out a couple things. This is for a 2-lane local street with 36 feet of right-of-way, allows on-street parking. Here's the 10-foot travel lanes I just mentioned, and then 8 foot for parallel parking. That adds up to about 36 feet there. This one here, very similar, except it's only 20 feet across. You'll notice no parallel parking, no frontage street, no on-street parking permitted. And then there's something in between that's 28 feet wide with 10-foot travel lanes and parking on one side. There are some sections of your municipal code that address parking related issues that I thought was probably important to summarize for you. And the sections of your code are included in the memo. I didn't include them here, but it's unlawful to park a commercial vehicle, and there is some definition of what a commercial vehicle is in other than commercial or industrial areas. So in a residential area such as Deccio Road, there are prohibitions for commercial vehicles. Boats, campers, buses, trailers are also prohibited from parking except for loading. And the red areas of the graphic that I showed you a minute ago, that's the 60 feet from the intersection where you shouldn't park larger vehicles. There is also required off-street parking. So each single family, that's what the SF stands for, each single family resident should provide parking for 2 off the street and 1 to 1.5 parking places for multifamily dwelling units. And it depends on the number of bedrooms. And then the fire code also indicates if it's, you should have 28 feet or more in width for parking on one side of the street. So we've come up with some options for you to consider to kind of address the complaints that the neighborhood has. One is do nothing, and I'll go through these in a little bit more detail here briefly. There's the recommendation that's already been provided from the Utilities and Transportation Advisory Commission, what I've called a modified UTAC recommendation, and then another one would be to widen Deccio Road. So option 1 is do nothing. It would maintain the status quo. This road's existed there for more than 10 years, the way it has. I'll be honest, I don't know what's brought the complaints on, why complaints now as to not, 8 or 10 years ago, if there's new members in the neighborhood there. This is contrary to standards. Option number 2 is the Utility and Transportation Advisory Commission recommendation, and they indicated let's take out the parking at the southern end where it's less than 28 feet, and so you would lose about 5 spaces. You lose 2 here and 2 here, and then the 1 up here, and so this is still less than the 34 feet that they were recommending. So you would lose this space here. So you can accommodate 2 here, 2 here, and then 1 more up here in this vicinity. This basically would be consistent with city standards. So option 3 that we came up with is a little bit different. It would allow parking on one side. Where it's less than 28 feet, and we considered that this would be a compromise, kind of between the tougher situation that you have that's substandard and trying to provide as much parking there as possible. So essentially, you get a little bit of parking back here, but it would prohibit him from the east side of the street. We think would be better to restrict parking on the east side. If you did the west side, then you would lose more spaces because you wouldn't be able to park in this spot here anyway, in front of the fire hydrant. So this would end up in a reduction of 3 spaces, 2 here and then the 1 up here. The 4th option that we had identified was to widen the road. Basically, you would retain the existing parking that you would have, but you would bring the width up such that 2 cars could park on either side, plus you could still fit the 20 feet of distance in between those parking, so that you could allow all the parking that exists there today within the standards. It would just take some funding to widen this road. It makes the most sense to us to widen it on the west because that's clearly the side that was narrowed. Just the curvature on this side is consistent. So this dashed line you see is where the street side of the sidewalk or the curb would be. And so the sidewalk would then extend towards this resident on that side. Might make it challenging for these two cars to park there. If they couldn't park there, then you might potentially gain at least one, maybe two, where this blue line is here, if the driveway were removed as well. So kind of in summary, here's the three options that would require a change. If you chose the no build option, I didn't show it here on this sheet, but it is included in the memo. So this option 2, option 3, option 4, and then here's the resulting parking that would occur or remain, exist, depending on the option that you chose. So that's basically a brief summary of the memo that we provided. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you so much. We're going to go through our council members in order. So let's start with Council Member Bobbitt.
I have a couple questions, but I think I've answered them. Thanks. Move on.
Okay, I'll go around, and if you have a question, raise up your hand and I'll know to come back to you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
I was curious if the option to block access from Whitman to Deccio is considered, essentially building a change or other kind of roadblock and converting it to a dead-end street. I was curious if that option was considered.
We had not considered that option. One of the things that would need to be considered there would be fire access and making sure that you could get a fire truck in there and able to turn around. So you would either need to probably construct a cul-de-sac at this end or some other turnaround device, such as what we call a hammerhead, where somebody could pull into here and back up and then head back to the north with a larger vehicle.
If it was a temporary block, I mean, this could be just completely non-viable, but I just heard it mentioned in previous discussions, that like maybe a temporary block with a chain and don't come this way kind of signs, which would be available. Like the fire department could have, remove the chain, if that would be viable.
An emergency secondary access, they do exist, and that could be an option as well, where you just put up some something to hold the chain up off across the street, right, and some signing there so that somebody didn't run into it and things. That would be an option. I'd have to think through perhaps what some of the pros and cons to that would be. I mean, the pros would be you wouldn't have to widen the street and you'd be able to retain the parking. There may be, like you say, fire access there. They'd always have to, well, I guess they could come from either end, but it would slow down their response time some, depending which, I'm not sure where your fire station is located and where that access would come from. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson.
A couple quick questions. Towards the beginning, and you don't need to go back to, this is a great visual, so I if you don't mind, I can go leave it here, but you stated 250 to 300 cars per day use this road?
That's our estimate. There are no traffic counts, but basically there are some national documents that we use for traffic studies. It's called the Trip Generation Manual, and it tells us that each residence on average will generate about 10 trips per day. Some do more, some do less, depending on if you have teenagers, I think maybe. But, and so we just counted the number of homes that we could see that are in this neighborhood that would access it. Now, that could be low because those that live at the north end may all go north and those that live at the south end. So it could be half of that at each end, but I don't expect that there would be very many through trips here. So, there could be some that live at this end that travel the full length and go to the north, but that's an estimation.
In the one picture, there was a trailer, looks like a, I don't know what it was, landscaping trailer. Is that, according to what you had detailed, is that appropriate or allowed to be parked there? Because I believe, I may be confused, but it seems like some of our prior conversations about this before today were mentioned that trailer and how it was wider than a car and was an issue. Is it, so what are your thoughts on that trailer that's parked there so many times?
Well, as I read your code, I think that would probably be inappropriate. So looking at the memo in your code section 10.12.120, it says owners of boats on trailers, campers, buses, and trailers of all types, shapes, and sizes are prohibited from parking such vehicles on public streets with the exception of temporarily loading and unloading belongings, merchandise, or cleaning the vehicle. So I would interpret that as probably a prohibited use.
And really, I bring that up because of whatever option we decide, if that's there on a parking on one side only, I think that's an issue ongoing or in the future we have to deal with. So yeah, great, thank you.
And in the memo, I didn't put it in the summary slides here, but in the memo, I indicated that regardless of which option, you should probably enforce the things that we had identified in our memo. Yeah.
Thank you.
Quick, before I move on to Councilmember Selby, Chief Tamaris, was there anything you wanted to add to that question or?
No, I was going to discuss the ordinance, but he covered it and he's absolutely correct. Temporary loading and unloading is about it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's fine.
Councilmember Selby.
Excuse me, I'm not sure if this question is for you because I think it's more of a policy question, but I'm wondering if there's been any discussion with the homeowners association about not allowing parking in the driveways, because it seems to me our code requires a certain number of parking spaces off street. And if they're not allowing any parking in the driveways, then all of them, their off-street parking is zero, it seems to me.
I don't think I understand that comment.
Okay, in the code, it says that every residence has to provide off-street parking.
For every residence, 1.5 off-street parking, I think it was.
Yeah.
And 2 on property parking for each resident.
Right.
Okay.
But if the homeowners association is banning parking in the driveways, they don't actually have the off-street parking. So it seems to me that we kind of need to sit down with the homeowners association and talk through a little bit before we get too far.
Right. Yeah, probably.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think that's probably more a John and Mike question than it is for you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Montgomery, but that's a question that I think needs to be answered before we go too far.
Well,
I think that could help as well. And I guess a question for your code enforcement is, does that include parking in garages, right? And how does that play into the calculations? But yes, I would agree. I think that's an appropriate thing to just clarify. I did search some, although I don't think I really have access to it, is a homeowners association document that identifies that, right?
Anything more, Councilmember Selby?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna switch back real quick to Councilmember Peterson.
Well, I guess a quick question does homeowners would, well, that would not trump city ordinance, would it? An association determination.
No.
It shouldn't, no.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Sherman.
I really don't have any other questions. I'm curious to hear John and Mike's opinions on this. I'm kind of sad that they're not here, but I did email with Mike earlier to ask some of my questions just from the reading. So I appreciated the presentation just to see it laid out again. So thank you.
Okay, and then Councilmember Trout.
I guess I have two comments, not necessarily questions. I agree with your earlier question about the traffic load on that street. I can't believe it's that high, but neither here nor there. It's a conservative number. I'll accept that. Melody, if I understand what you're saying correctly, the ordinance says one thing. If the homeowners association has done something to in conflict with the the rules that we have, we would have precedence. If they have done that, it'd be informative because I think it would change this thing quite a bit. Because that would open up a number of parking places. Are they complying with what the city's saying? Right now, they're asking for some relief on something that appears to be a safety issue. I think we're all inclined to go along with that unless they've done something that has exacerbated the hazards on that street.
If I recollect, and I could be wrong, so I thought they had said that they do have two parking spots. They have a garage and then a spot out like their driveway, but their homeowners association says they can't park in their driveway. So really they only have one spot, and which is why if they have two cars, they're parking on the street.
I guess my point there is if that's in fact what they're doing, they've created this problem. That needs to be fixed. And I'm not going to say we can't work a resolution to that. I am very sympathetic to what they're talking about, but if they have changed they've created their own set of rules for their neighborhood in contravention to the city, I think there's some question about their argument.
All right, okay. Did you have a second one?
No, that was it. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm gonna loop back because we got some hand raises, but I just need to ask real quick. Councilmember Peterson, did you raise your hand again or is it just still up?
It's still up, I think.
Okay, okay. Then Councilmember Selby, and then we'll go to Councilmember Bobbitt.
I just think I want to really encourage us that the first step is to sit down and talk with the homeowners association. It could be, because I've seen this happen before, that the homeowners association voted in a bunch of rules a long time ago, and then it's since become essentially inactive or dormant. And if that's the case, the people that are there now may not even care about that. So, or they may, I don't know. But that's why I think we need to talk to them if they exist.
Lisa, am I correct that during our first meeting, a representative of the homeowners association was one of the speakers?
Yes, that is correct.
Oh, good. So this would be a good thing to reach out and,
So I
do some
believe it was them
education.
I heard it from. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, back to Councilmember Bobbitt.
Okay, I'm kind of looking at the layout of this and wondering where the road narrows. Is that one piece of property or one property owner? And why wasn't it put in at 36 feet the whole way? Is that because we don't have a right of way there? Or, I mean, I'm looking at it and I see two buildings kind of merged together. So it looks like it'd be one property owner on that whole narrowed spot.
Are you talking about on the west side?
West side, yes.
Yes, I believe it is one property. And Mike had the history on this, so I'm just going to kind of give a general. At the time they opened up Deccio at Whitman, the city, it was expensive to do it. They would have had to have bought some of the property off that property owner. And the property owner also did not want to lose, because he used to have that cul-de-sac. So he used to have access, he used to utilize the cul-de-sac. So he kind of, between the city and him, they just decided to just not do it. It was a bad decision. It didn't meet code, and they did it to kind of save money and to kind of not have issues with the homeowner. And so now, all these years later, we're dealing with it.
Okay, well, the answer is that we don't really have the right of way on that strip for a 36-foot wide street.
Correct, we have to buy it.
And I'm not sure if widening the road is really the answer either. It seems like no parking on the west side would be better than the no parking on the east side as far as removing spots, but I guess you just get more total doing it the other way, but I don't know. Where I see two cars in the photograph are the two spots we want to remove from parking. What was that, option 2? I don't have all 3 options on my screen right now.
Yeah, both option 2 and 3 would remove the places where you can see people park in this particular photo. I don't know the full history, but I think you're right, Mayor, is that this narrowing of the road was likely a compromise at the time. It would be fairly expensive to widen it here. I don't know if these 2 cars would be able to remain parked in front of that home. And so, the decision was made to, there's electric box and utilities down here. And so, yeah, it's a challenging thing. And they made a compromise at the time and said, let's do it this way. And now we're dealing with that a little bit, right? So,
let's see, looking at option 3, you have no parking where there are 2 cars in the photograph. It seems like you should move the no parking to the other side, along that narrowed strip.
Well,
compromised property. I don't know. You're just trying to maximize total spots.
Right. Well, so you can see under option 3, the middle one here that's on the screen, you would keep 6 spaces, so 2 here if you prohibited parking on the east side. That's the way we prepared this scenario because it was more. So if you prohibited parking on the east side, you could keep 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. So you get these 6. Whereas if you prohibited it on the west side, you'd get these 2 and that one. So you would lose.
But it seems
6.
like you're giving more parking spots for the property owner on the west side when we really need more parking on the east side for all the residences.
I would agree. And ideally, you would want the parking on the right side, but with that fire hydrant and all that, there's more driveways on the east. I mean, these folks can still park on the other side. They would just have to walk across the street, but there would be more parking if you prohibited it on the east. So you can choose to prohibit it on the other side. We're basically
so you're giving four parking spots to one property owner versus 3 parking spots to several residences. Like I said, you're going strictly by numbers instead of who's going to utilize those parking spots. Now a resident would have to walk across the street to park over on the west side when you really have one property owner. They'll now have 4 parking spots to.
Well, Jerry,
yeah.
Well, we're not giving them any parking. There's still public street parking. I'm sorry, Paul, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I did. I just want to remind everybody that the picture that you see here is just a snap in time. This just happened to be 2 cars on the east side when several times you'll see 4 or 5 on the west side. And this time you don't see them. So this is just a snap in time. It's not a regular occurrence. I think you need to realize that.
But Paul, the 4 or 5 on the west side, I understand those were commercial vehicles, or he has a business.
Correct. And the reason the reason the west side was chosen is because there's a slight grade. And when you come around off of Whitman, there's enough little slight grade that you can't necessarily see cars coming the other direction. That's not so for the west side.
I thought that was covered by the 60 feet of no parking in the intersection.
Well, yeah, I suppose you're right. Is that correct?
You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying,
Well,
okay,
that's
we have.
only because those parking spots are blocked. Otherwise, there wouldn't be.
Anyway, that's what I'm looking at. The narrow part of the road is really on the west side, and I would think that I'd put the no parking there, even though I lose one parking spot.
And that is an option. Yeah, I mean, you obviously can choose which side you want to prohibit parking on.
It seems like there's more residents on the east side that could utilize that street parking versus the left side or the west side. I mean, that's just a thought. That was just my questions.
Just so that I understand what you're meaning. Are you looking at number 2 up, or the one in the middle? I guess that's 3. Are you looking at that one, but moving the parking to the west side? Is that the one you're thinking? Am I understanding you correctly?
Looking at option 3 is removing parking where I think we should keep it, and remove the parking over on the narrowed side on the west side. I know that's 1, 2, 3, 4 spots versus 1, 2, 3.
Right. So his suggestion would be to take off this red portion right here and this one, and change this part and this part to red.
Okay, so how many parking spots would that actually open? Because there's a fire hydrant right there as well.
Well, the fire hydrant's in yellow, and I'm not talking about that one.
Right. So instead, you would end up with two spaces. So right here, you'd end up 2 spaces on the west side and 3 on the east. So you have 5 spaces instead of 6.
Okay, good discussions. Anybody else have anything else you want to ask or comment? Again, no actions being taken. This is just discussions for us.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Well,
okay.
Seems like I'd maintain the parking on the east side, except for the 60 feet from the intersection, and then remove the parking on the west side because that's where the road actually narrows. It seemed like it'd be a smoother flow, and et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay.
Sacrifice 1 parking spot.
And it also, we don't know, but we have the discussion with the homeowners association that may also absolve some of that need as well. So yeah, there's good options.
Just more bedrooms on the east than on the west.
Absolutely.
Somebody's taking notes. Yes.
Lisa. Okay, if nobody else has any questions or comments for Spencer, we can let him go and move on. Okay, it looks like we are done with that. Thank you very much, Spencer. Appreciated it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
You as
you.
well. Okay, next up is the wastewater system plan with Alex Frazzi, who will be presenting for us. And he's from JUB as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't have any slides to share with you this evening, but Mike asked me just to give you just a real quick summary of where we're at on this project. So this has to do with the wastewater treatment plant. And just to give you just a really quick history, so the wastewater treatment plant, there's an existing permit that guides the direction of the wastewater treatment plant. Has certain requirements in it. In that permit, there is a compliance schedule that asks you to address a problem by the end of 2023. And so this is a journey that started a few years back. The first step in the process was developing a facility plan. And so we did that in 2018. And in that facility plan, we looked at several different alternatives to address the Department of Ecology's concerns with your wastewater treatment plant. And I believe that was probably the last time that I was in front of you where we were discussing some of the recommendations that we were considering at the time. And so we made a final decision on which ones to move forward with, and we developed a phasing plan.
Oh, Alex, I think you're frozen.
Oh. Am I caught up yet?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So how much of that did you miss?
I heard phasing plan was the last part.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we had developed a phasing plan, and so that facility plan was reviewed and approved by the Department of Ecology. The next step in the process was securing funding for the design phase of phase 1 of the improvement. So we were successful in getting Department of Ecology funding to cover the design fee. And so that's where we're at right now, is in the middle of the design of the phase 1 improvement. So we just finished what we call our 30% conceptual design, and 2 of the attachments that you see on this agenda were 2 of the workshops that we had with city staff over the past few weeks. There were a lot of details in there. So, but what we did was we prepared a conceptual design and our cost opinions, and we spent 2, I think 3-hour workshops with the city staff and the operations staff to go through a lot of the key concerns. I don't plan on going through those page by page here tonight. I figure you can look through those and we can follow up with any questions, because we're just providing a brief overview of where we're at in the process tonight. But those workshops were a great success. We worked through a lot of details, and we got a lot of great direction from the city staff. And so now, after those workshops, now we're moving forward into our final design. And so the next step is we'll be preparing what we call our 60% progress print design. We hope to have that done by around April, and we'll submit that to the city staff for review. And we'll also submit that to the Department of Ecology for review. And then the goal is to get our 90% design submitted sometime around September. The goal in terms of the design process was we want to get all of the design finished by the end of this year, but primarily we want to get the design in front of Department of Ecology for review and approval by this September or October, because we intend to apply for funding this October with the Department of Ecology for the construction phase. So now that we're moving into the final design phase, we're also going to be moving into the permitting phase. So there's likely to be some public involvement, some public notice associated with that. So you'll probably be getting some questions from residents about this project. Really most of the work is within the treatment plant site itself. The expansion area is that 80-acre DNR piece of property that you purchased a few years ago. That 80-acre property is currently dryland wheat farmed. We will be adding a new 50 million gallon lined lagoon in the southeast corner of that property. And we'll be converting the remainder of that 80-acre parcel to some irrigated croplands for applying effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. So I would anticipate, I know that Mike has reached out to some of the neighboring property owners up there already, but I imagine as we are entering the permitting phase of this process, this might be another chance for people to ask some questions and concerns. So I think it'd be good for you guys to be prepared for that and understand what's going on there. And then the other big thing we're doing now is we're working on trying to come up with a funding strategy for the construction of this project. This is a huge project. We estimate the construction cost to be about $22 million. So this is a really big lift. So we're trying hard to identify as much grant funding as we can to try and minimize the impact on the ratepayers. We are working on scheduling a meeting here sometime during the month of March, where we're looking to bring the Department of Ecology, we're looking to bring USDA, and some other federal funding to the table to see how we can leverage each of their funding sources, how we can leverage as much grant as we can. So we're working on some options to try and fund this project right now too. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is, as part of this project, we do have an advertisement out right now. So one of the portions of this project is upgrading the UV disinfection system at the wastewater treatment plant. And there are multiple different vendors that have various pieces of equipment of different dimensions that we can work with. And so we found that the best option for us is, rather than trying to design around 4 or 5 different pieces of equipment that are different sizes, it's best for us to pick one so that we can design around that one and prepare a detailed design. So what we're doing right now is we're soliciting bids from the various vendors. We provided them with some performance specifications, and we've asked them to prepare a bid basically for us to review that would, and we'll select the piece of equipment that has the lowest life cycle costs over the next 20 years. So that way, if there are some pieces of equipment that are cheap now but very expensive to operate because they have a high energy use, we'll factor that into the decision. So those bids are out. I think it was advertised on Monday. And so we'll probably be coming back to you here in the next month or 6 weeks with the results of that bidding process to select the vendor we want to choose for that UV design equipment. So that's the update that I had. Paul, is there anything you'd like to add to that summary?
No, I just agree that the meetings that we had, the 2 meetings we had, were very productive, and I think it's moving along well.
Any questions?
Let's go around for any questions. We'll start with Councilmember Bobbitt.
No questions. Good presentation. Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Selby.
No questions, but a very good report. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Sherman.
Questions.
And Councilmember Trope.
No questions.
All right. I think they're letting you off. Councilmember Peterson.
Sad day. Hey, Alex, the $20 million, I know our original discussions, there was like, what was it, $50 million plants. There were, the 20 million is really, and I've heard this used over and over again, this is kind of the sweet spot we're in right now, where I had always kind of thought that was high. That we were trying to filter items that could not be traced, that whole discussion in the past, type of stuff. And I haven't read through all the documentation, of course, but we're kind of there for that price range, that price level.
Yeah. So in the facility plan, we had broken it into 3 different phases of improvements. And so phase 1, we were trying to do just what was necessary to be in compliance with the permit. And that's what phase 1 really is doing. And that has always been around the $20 million mark. Our latest estimate after this 30% design effort was, we estimated to be right around $22 million. And so now that we've gone through this conceptual design, we feel like we're at the point where we're more confident in that number. And that's why now we're really working on the strategy to try and find funding for that $22 million project. I don't remember off the top of my head what the costs of phase 2 and 3 were. But phase 2, it would basically be a rework of the biological treatment system at the plant. I want to say that one was somewhere in the range of $20 million as well. Phase 3 is one that hopefully you will never have to pay for. So phase 3 would be if ecology tells you can't discharge to the creek at any point during the entire year. Right now, you're allowed to discharge to the creek from November through April. And so basically the treated effluent gets discharged to Garrison Creek from November through April. And then in the spring and summer, it's land applied to the croplands that are out there. But if ecology comes back and tells you you can't even discharge to the creek in the winter, that means we have to make the storage volume very large because we need to store 6 months worth of water and save it for when you can actually apply it to the crops when they need it. So that's what phase 3 would be. That will hopefully never occur. But phase 1 has always been right around the $20 million range, and we're still there right now.
Thanks, Alex.
Lauren, my apologies. You're the one person who had a question and I skipped over you. Okay, so is there any other questions for Alex at this time? Okay, thank you, Alex. Just stand by because we're going to move on to the Southwest Sewer Project with Mr. Hartwig and Mr. Fazari.
Well, I can start with a few comments. Council awarded the contract to Apollo, and they were issued a notice to proceed. Following that, they have started to mobilize down on the TO Road site. They have their work trailers there and so forth. Right now, they are busy trying to get submittals done, and JUB is going through the submittals to review them, see if they comply with specifications and so forth. And that's a big project. There's a lot of specifications going on here with the lift station and the deep sewer and all that. There's been a meeting with property owners, and then we've had our first actual construction meeting. I was unable to attend, and Alex can talk about that a little bit, but they're hoping that they might be able to start some work, excavation work on the wet well site sometime around the 15th. But that's all contingent on getting submittals approved, submitted and approved. Alex, you want to add on?
Yeah, I would just add on to that, yeah, we had our first progress meeting with the contractor and it went well. And we plan on having bi-weekly progress meetings with the contractor. They're submitting their updated schedule every week. And so the schedule that they're submitting talks about what happened last week and what's going to happen for the next 2 weeks. So they're very organized, they're very on top of things. We're off to a great start, I think. And then I also just wanted to mention, in terms of the schedule and the working days that are in the contract, they have all the way through the end of November and into early December to complete the project. So you guys will be seeing construction going on this throughout the year this year. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is that we do have a JUB employee on site full-time providing inspection and construction observation. So we have eyes that are out there the whole time, and he'll be interacting with the contractor and the public as well. So you'll see him running around in a little white truck out there. So.
Okay, so we can move on to questions if there's no other information to share, and we'll start with Councilmember Bobbitt.
Questions, thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
No questions, thanks.
Councilmember Peterson.
No questions.
Councilmember Selby. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I really appreciate you doing such a good job of showing how it works and how everything is going, so that I can just make my students watch the video of this in wastewater treatment class. No questions.
Councilmember Sherman.
No questions.
Okay, and Councilmember Trope.
No questions.
All right. Well, thank you both. Appreciate the information. And Alex, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Have a good night. Okay, so moving on to the body worn cameras by Chief Damaris.
Right. Good evening, Council. As you know, we've been implementing the body worn cameras, and you were gracious in financing that for us for this year. We have received the cameras. We have negotiated the policy with the union, and we are just about ready to implement. One of the things that it is recommended that we do is a resolution or ordinance. So state legislation under RCW 10-109-010 has authorized the use of body worn cameras for law enforcement use. The College Place Police Department is requesting a resolution to acknowledge and authorize the use of the body worn cameras for officers of the College Place Police Department. A requirement for the RCW is to establish policies regarding the use of body worn cameras, which we have, and you should each have a copy of that policy. The police department has completed that, and we are asking for authorization to deploy the body worn cameras pursuant to the RCW. And yeah, any questions on that?
Let's go around for questions. Councilmember Bobbitt.
I'm still looking over the documentation I have. Come back to me, please.
Okay, Councilmember Cleveland.
Yeah, the question, I don't think there'll be any problems with this on the College Place State Department, but you occasionally hear stories about how there was some sort of incident and the footage is rather suspiciously lost. So I was curious, what kind of safeguards do we have on data storage for body cameras?
Yeah, so we are going with Axon. They are recognized as leading in the industry. Everything is loaded into the cloud, and they have a really good success rate with that. So we don't have it stored on any of our servers. You won't have to worry about power outages, losing video, or any of that type of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Peterson.
No questions.
Councilmember Selby.
No questions.
Councilmember Sherman.
No questions.
Councilmember Trope.
No questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate that. We are going to move on to the Peddler Business License Code update, and that will be, we're going to go back to Councilmember Bobbitt.
I just wanted to thank our police chief. It looks well documented as far as the policies. I like what I see there, and I approve.
Thank you, sir.
My apologies for. Okay, now back to the Peddler Business License Code update by Ms. Colwell and Chief Tamaris.
Thank you. The document that you guys received says draft on it, and so somehow the final version didn't get to you, but nothing has changed since this. And I'll just give you a little bit of background. We had a person come in to apply for a license to go door to door to sell. And Mary Ann at the police department ran a background check, which we do on all of our applicants, and she had some concerns about issuing a permit or a license to do this. And so that prompted me to dig into what we actually have in our code. And so from what I understand in speaking with John and Mike is that we don't want to require peddlers or solicitors to go through the state business license system and basically have a business license to operate. But what we do want to do is to be able to regulate their behavior, to screen them for certain crimes, to have information about them, should we get complaints and that type of thing. So we do want to actually require some sort of permit or licensing, and our code doesn't fit with that intent. So my suggestion is to update the code to make it clear that the business license, formal business license through the state system is not required. However, we need to require it through a different section in our code. And that brought up the topic, in speaking with John and Mike, that brought up the topic of food carts and food cart pods and food trucks. And currently we allow food trucks, but it's through a special use permit. And so it contemplates, you know, the farmer's market or an event where they would park their truck. And with COVID, Mike shared his interest in perhaps permitting food carts on an annual basis so that they can operate in certain areas. If a vacant land, the landowner says, yes, come sell food on my property, that might be something that the council wants. And so what I'm asking you, well, I'm here to answer questions, but what I'm asking for you today is direction. I didn't want to start digging into drafting code without you guys providing direction that this is something that you want to be done. So at this point, I'll open up to any questions if you have any about what we're trying to do.
Okay. Before we go to questions, I just want to make sure that Chief Damaris or Mike don't have anything to contribute.
Yeah, so I can just add some information. So basically our business license code, it was mute and language pertaining to the solicitation. Back when we had to update the codes to reflect what the state was requiring, that was a little bit of an oversight as far as dealing with the solicitation side of the coin. So there have been situations where as of late where we need that a little more documented. In fact, there was just a peddler's solicitation complaint and concern today even. And then really with the food carts and food trucks, while we addressed it from a land use perspective, there is a bit of a gap within the licensing element where we felt that there could be some clarity gained of it. So that's what you're really seeing before you trying to get to the crux of those questions.
Yeah, and Mayor, I'll just comment really briefly that the intent behind these checks is to ensure safe community safety, so that we're not having someone, taking advantage of people in our community or perhaps checking out their residence and planning a burglary or whatever it may be, a nefarious act that they may have. This system of check kind of gives some credibility to their license and their ability to go knock door to door in our community.
You want to make sure they're a legitimate business.
That's correct.
Let's go with Mr. Councilmember Bobbitt.
Well, being a participant in our local Pathfinder Club and doing fundraisers on private property, would this affect a group like that?
It wouldn't. Nonprofits, charitable organizations are exempt from this business license requirement. And then the Constitution protects individuals going door to door under religious purposes.
Okay,
So
but
no
I'm
effect
just,
on that.
because we're selling a product to raise funds for special events, mostly our international camporees, still would be required to have a permit to do that, or?
I'd have to dig into the code. I can't answer that right now. I know that we and might be able to add to this, but I know like for fireworks stands, we provide a first in line for a nonprofit that benefits youth. But I'd have to look in to see. I think because you're selling something not for a personal gain, it exempts it out of the business license requirement. And then you'd have to comply with if there's food or you're setting signs up, that type of thing. So you're okay. That's not the intent of the city to regulate that nonprofit selling.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Cleveland.
No questions, but it seems sensible to clarify and update the code. So thank you guys for being proactive with that.
Councilmember Peterson.
No questions.
Councilmember Selby.
No questions.
Councilmember Sherman?
No questions.
And Councilmember Trope?
No questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Colwell. We appreciate your work on that.
Absolutely. I will continue to work with John and Mike before we get a formal proposal to you guys on what we suggest as code amendments.
Great. Thank you so much.
And if anyone thinks of anything else, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the last item on the agenda, the recruitment service contract for Public Works Director, and Ms. Doering's going to present that.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Alrighty. As you may have heard, Paul, our Public Works Director, has informally notified the city that he intends to retire later this year. The requirements for the position will now include a professional engineer certification, as that position will oversee the public works and the engineering. In the past, the city has used a professional recruitment agency to fill the upper level leadership positions, most recently for the police chief and the city administrator positions. We feel like this position is probably a position that we want to go ahead and use a professional recruitment company for. We feel like we'd be more likely to get a pool of qualified candidates and be able to find the right person the first time around. The estimated expenditure for it is $25,000. And so we are wondering if that's something you would be willing to approve. It was not included in the 2021 budget. So I would answer questions or.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, we'll start with Councilmember Bobbitt.
I'm sure Lauren will ask this, but do we have funds to draw from for this?
It's my understanding from Mike that that it can come out of the reserve for storm, water, and streets, as that position is split between all three of those. But if Brian or Mike have anything to add to that.
Yeah, sure. I could add stuff to that. Keep in mind also that while we didn't fill the city engineer position, we did budget for it. Granted, some of that is going to JUB for engineering review, but that is a significant amount, and that position has been vacant. And the rationale behind that was that whoever would be the replacement public works director would basically also have a professional engineer designation and be like the hybrid city engineer public works director. So I do believe the money is there to do this. I would also like to add the reason that we're bringing this concept before you is like, so for instance, when we recruited for a finance director, we're very thankful. Luckily, on the third round, Brian gave us a look, but it actually took like 3 rounds, and we were getting deeply worried about finding someone for a finance director position, and especially with this position, since we're trying to look for someone with a professional engineer stamp. We just think those concerns about doing it in-house are warranted, where maybe a larger scale recruitment similar to what we did for my position when I got hired here, and then the police chief is probably a way to go.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cleveland.
I was very impressed with, I think it was Prothman that recruited Mike and Chief Tamaris. The process that they initiated and the scope of people that they're able to grab. They took all of our interests and requirements for the positions very seriously. And so just, I'm all for this, finding someone that is the right fit for us, that, it's on our wish list. Seems like a great investment.
Good history there. Councilmember Peterson.
I couldn't say say it any better than Councilmember Cleveland. I agree completely. Thank you.
Councilmember Selby.
I completely agree.
Okay. Councilmember Sherman.
Yep, I'm the same. I agree. Prothman is who we used also at Valley Transit when we hired our general manager almost 2 years ago, and going through that process a third time and then a fourth time because we did it twice with them. It's amazing. So yeah, I highly recommend. But we did get a great finance director too without them. So that should not be lost.
Or Brian. And then Councilmember Trope.
No question.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like they have great history. Valley Transit have great leadership there as well. So sounds good. We'll be ready for it in council meeting. Councilmember Peterson has one more question or comment.
You know, at some future date, we will bring Ray back or whatnot for a workshop on the fireworks discussion. Is that still in the works?
Yes. Yes, I had the questions that to police and fire chief take a look at. They've gotten back to me. So actually tomorrow I'm releasing a survey out on SurveyMonkey through social media and then our website and so forth. And we'll have it out there this entire month. So that way we have a good cross section of data that we can present to you at the April workshop meeting.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Way to go to keep Mike on his toes, Lauren. Okay. Is there any other business for good of the order?
Yes, I just have a question for Jerry Bobbitt. We're trying to put together a finance committee meeting, and there is an email out about dates that we're looking for. If you could check your email and respond.
Yeah, I just saw that before this meeting started.
Okay.
I'm going to respond to it later.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn. Councilmember Jerry.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilmember Trope.
Thank you, Councilmember Trope. If there's no objections, the meeting is adjourned at 6:42 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.